Well, my name is Evan Dallas, and my roots began here at Hebron Lutheran Church. I started attending here when I was negative 9 months old. And I received my first communion here, and I was confirmed here, and my life with Christ began at this church. And I gave my confession to a man named David Dennis. Some of you might remember him. He was the youth pastor here when I was in 4th grade. I was hired here about a year ago. Ever since, Pastor Dave has whittled me down to preach. And this morning is Pastor Dave's first Sunday as a parishioner here, and he's going to sit in the back loft and hold up signs for when I'm going too long. But Pastor Dave's legacy here will be one of grace, mercy, and love, and we're certainly thankful for his service at this church. Will you please pray with me? Father, pour through me your words of life, and let what I say on this difficult topic be useful to all of us. And may my words come from you. It's in your precious Son's name I pray. Amen. Now, Bill, I'm not sure how to change. There we go. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost with this technology. I have this thing, I've got this thing, I've got the keyboard. Got a lot of stuff going on up here. There was a scrawny parking lot tree that had its roots paved over when the Alfred Murrah Federal Building was built in 1977 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The concrete should have killed the tree, but it didn't. And it served the next 18 years to provide shade for the cars parked next to it. On April 19th, 1995, a 4,000-pound car bomb was driven next to the building and detonated by a man named Tim McVeigh. 168 people were tragically killed, including many children. It was just over 25 years ago today. The tree was almost cut down to provide valuable evidence, but people noticed the weeks following that little green shoots were coming out of the tree. And it was decided that the tree should be saved. And the tree was indeed saved. And today it stands full and beautiful, and it serves as a message of hope for all of those who come to see it. Now, there's nothing more important in the Christian faith than our response to suffering. It's going to make us bitter or better, and it's going to make or break us. And how we respond to it is what sets us apart as Christians. And my prayer today is for all of us to remain full and abundant and a message of hope, as so many of you already are, to others. So I'm going to start in Romans 5 and pull 3 truths that we can hold on to when we face difficult times. And that is the tree today, of course. So here we go. We're starting in Romans 5, verse 2. We rejoice in hope of the glory of God. So let's stop there. So we rejoice in hope of the glory of God. Now I can get on board with that. Those are some pretty words. Hope, glory. But then look at the next verse. Not only that, but we rejoice in suffering. Suffering. Knowing that suffering produces endurance, character, hope. Suffering, isn't that an ugly, ugly word? It's an ugly word for me to say, it's an ugly word for you to hear, and it's an ugly word for us to experience. So what do we do when we suffer? Well, the first thing the Bible tells us we can do is we know God understands. The very fact that this scripture is in the Bible is a testament that God understands, or else he wouldn't have put it in the Bible. In 1865, a 36-year-old Englishman by the name of William Booth founded the Salvation Army. And he sent a couple of guys to New York to start a new mission. But they were met with opposition and failure. Nobody was listening to a word they said. So they sent back word to William Booth and said, we want to quit. We're done with this. And William Booth sent back a telegram with 2 words: try tears. Try tears. And they used their tears to convey that they understood. And you know what happened? They experienced a mighty revival. Now, this story illustrates that we as humans are intrinsically in need of somebody who understands. Think about something you've been through. You want to talk to somebody who's been through it. So wouldn't it make sense that we want a God who understands? And the good news is the Christian faith is radically different than all of the other world religions and worldviews because we have a God who understands. It's amazing. Even since the very beginning, Genesis 6:6, it says God's heart was grieved over people. And if it wasn't enough that God understands, then there's Jesus. Jesus suffered. Jesus actually came to earth and suffered. Now, don't take my word for it. Let's look at some of these emotions that Jesus suffered. See if you can identify it with any of them. And I put the verse that it corresponds to. Jesus knew temptation. He knew poverty. He knew frustration. He knew weariness. He knew disappointment. He knew rejection. He knew sorrow. He knew ridicule. And oh yes, Jesus knew loneliness very well, didn't he? And one of my favorite verses in the Bible is the shortest verse. And no, it's not because it's the shortest verse and it's easy to memorize. But it's John 11:35. Jesus wept. I want you all to memorize that this morning. John 11:35, Jesus wept. I'm going to give you a test at the end. You can't leave unless you pass the test. Jesus wept. John 11:35. Remember what William Booth said? Try tears. That's what Jesus did. Jesus tried tears. And I say that he experienced a mighty revival. The main reason that God can be trusted in our suffering is because God suffered and God understands. Hebrews 4:15 through 16. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and help in the time of need. My friends, if you're going through something difficult today, rest assured, God understands and cares.
He knows the bit.
So what do we do when we suffer? We understand, or we know that God understands. The second thing we can do when we suffer is we change our attitude from control to trust. Now, something that can be very troubling for people to understand is that we were not made for pleasure. We were not put on this earth to have a good time, and God is much more interested in our character than our comfort, because our character is what we're going to take to heaven. Now, Paul says something radical. He says, yeah, you're going to have suffering for sure, but your suffering will be good for you. He says your suffering is going to produce character. Now, how on earth do we get from suffering to character? And it's very important that you listen. It's our attitude. Our attitude become habits, and our habits form our character. And when we suffer, it gives us a distinct choice to either have an attitude of control or trust. Let's look at control. Let's look at what that looks like. Control says this. It says, I own me. I'm in control of my finances, and I can manage them. I'm in control of my health. I can manage my health. I own my career. I own my money. I own my relationships. And I can control them. And you know what happens when we have this mentality? We worry. Are any of you worrywarts? I know I am. I know I am. I know this firsthand. Worry is a sign that you're trying to be in charge of your life. And we worry because we cannot possibly plan for all of the contingencies that will inevitably happen. Worry says it's all up to me. And that's a lot of pressure. We see this control mentality played out in Luke 18. We had this young ruler, and he comes up to Jesus, and he says, Jesus, what do I do to get to heaven? And Jesus says, well, you know the commandments. Oh, yes, I know the commandments. And he said, well, there's one more thing I want you to do for me. I want you to sell all your stuff and follow me. The man said, can't do it. I can't do it. And I love the verse. It said that he walked away sad, for he had many possessions. It doesn't say he walked away happy because he was in control of life and he had a bunch of stuff that could insulate him from problems. No, he was sad. Just the idea of giving it up made him sad. He didn't even have to do it. This control mentality, friends, will always disappoint you because we can never truly control, and we do not own us. Now let's look at the other attitude that we can choose when we suffer. Trust. Trust says, God owns me. Yes, I have preferences, and I'd rather not this happen to me. But God, I trust that you have my best interest at heart. Romans 8:28. He works together for all things for our good. Now let me give you an example of what trust looks like. I have a painting in my house to remind me of a special visit. Gary Greiser can attest to this fact. We went to visit a woman in her house named Phyllis. And Phyllis was a member of our church, and she suffered with cancer for years. She had a hard life. She didn't have much stuff. And when we went to her house, she had Elvis stuff everywhere. She tried to give me some. And Phyllis came in and she said, I trust God's going to take care of me. And you know what Phyllis did? She prayed for me. She prayed for me. Here she was, probably going to die in 3 months. And she prayed for me. Phyllis had peace. Phyllis said, I trust God. That's how it ends. That's how trust ends. It ends in peace. Control ends in sadness. It's up to you which one you're going to pick when you suffer. I've had my fair share of suffering. I'm only 31 years old, but I can tell you, I have not learned anything from my good times. Everything good that I am and have is because I've suffered. I have not learned anything for when times were good. And friends, through it all, we can learn to trust in Jesus. Learn to trust in God. I've had many tears and sorrows. I've had questions for tomorrow. There have been times I didn't know right from wrong. But in every situation, God gave blessed consolation that my trials came to only make me strong. Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. So what do we do when we suffer? Let's have a little, back up one slide, Bill, for me. Let's have a little review. You guys are so good at responsive reading. Lutherans are the best. So let's go through this. Number one, know God understands our suffering. 2, we change our attitude from control to trust. Go ahead, Bill. And 3, we have an eternal perspective. You may have heard the story about the man who died and he went to heaven. And he met St. Peter at the gate. And he was curious about the value system in heaven. And he said, Peter, how much is a minute worth in heaven? Peter said, a minute is worth 1,000,000 years, in exactly that tone. And the man said, wow, well, how much is a nickel worth in heaven? And Peter said, a nickel is worth $1,000,000. Wow, Peter was astonished. Peter said, well, can I have a nickel? The man said, yeah, in a minute. I wasn't sure if any of you would get it, but you all did. You all did a good job. You see, God's timing and His value systems are different. And this world would have you believe that all there is the here and now. Doom and gloom, death, decay, coronavirus, riots, you name it. I have yet to turn on the news and they talk about the new heaven and the new earth. If any of you know that news channel, please tell me, because I certainly want to watch it. That's why we have to read the Bible. It's impossible to read the Apostle Paul without seeing things from an eternal perspective. Now notice in Romans 5:4 it says that suffering produces hope. Now we need hope because we were not made for earth. We were not made to live in this sin and in this suffering. Our souls have a passport, I believe. And on the passport it's stamped under country of origin with Kingdom of Heaven. And when we suffer, when we see suffering, it creates a longing. Do you know what I'm talking about, this longing? Sometimes, when I see what's going on in the world, I think, God, how much more can you take? How much more can we take? And the new heaven and the new earth certainly sound a lot better. So how do we get hope in the heaven in the midst of our suffering? Well, let's look at 2 Corinthians 4:17. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. Now I want you to look at the words preparing for us. This can also be translated into produce. Now, it would be good enough if it said this light momentary affliction is followed by an eternal weight of glory, but it doesn't say that. It says that our affliction is actually producing something very weighty in heaven. This little bit here is producing a whole lot of something good there. That means that suffering has a purpose. That makes it a little easier to bear, doesn't it? Many of you are carrying around chains. And the suffering doesn't seem light or momentary at all. The chains are heavy. And they're cold and they're binding. But I want us to do a little exercise. I want us to replace the word affliction with whatever you're going through. Think about something. For this light momentary pain is preparing for me an eternal glory. For this light and momentary loss is preparing for me an eternal weight of glory. For this light and momentary divorce is preparing for me an eternal weight and glory. Now I wish I could tell you exactly how your suffering is going to work out in the end, and in what ways God is weaving his masterpiece quilt with your suffering, but I can't tell you that. I don't know the whole story. But he does give us the half that matters. And he says, child, no, I understand. Please change your attitude and trust me. Please have an eternal perspective. If you remember only one thing today, I hope you remember this. When suffering hits, turn your eyes upon Jesus. One of the best ways I know how to do this is listen to music. Music provides comfort and solace like nothing else can. Sometimes words just don't do the trick, do they? Have you ever been driving and all of a sudden the sun gets in your eyes and you can't see anything? You reach for your sunglasses, they're not there. And you can't see anything around you. You know what happens? Everything around you starts getting a little bit more dim, doesn't it? That's what happens when we turn our eyes upon Jesus. Our suffering is a whole lot more bearable when we do that. I would invite you to stay seated, and if you know this song, please sing it with us. Turn your eyes upon Jesus.